There is a magnetism. There's an energy to someone who's in momentum. But to me, momentum means there's someone who is growing. There's momentum around their personal growth, not just their business growth. And that's ultimately what I want for all of us, because the more I've fallen in love with the person I'm becoming instead of the outward success, the more I have really made my goals that are going to force me to grow. We are officially at part 3 of this Becoming Undeniable series, and this is a really important piece of what it's going to require in order for you to become a magnet for the things that you want to attract this year, the opportunities, the connections, the abundance that you desire. And it's also the place where I see most people get stuck, where I have gotten stuck in my own journey. So we're going to unpack these 4 stages to your next up level. And understanding them is so important to make sure that you don't get stuck, that you don't feel like you're going in the wrong direction when what's actually happening is you're right on track. You're right where you're supposed to be. You're just leaving the person that you once were in order to become the person you need to be. And that is an uncomfortable process. I don't think we talk about that enough, just how uncomfortable it is when you're evolving and what it is to become a magnet for the things that you want in your life, in your business. You have to outgrow the parts of you that can't come with you where you're going next. And if you're not surrounded by a community, or you're not surrounded by people having conversations about how tough that really is, you might be tempted to think that you're off track when you're actually stepping into exactly the version of yourself that you need to be in order to have those big breakthroughs. So when I learned this, I was not the originator of this 4-phase template. It's something that I've learned along the way. I actually don't know exactly who to credit with coming up with this, but it's a really simple way to understand what's actually happening as you are evolving into your next level. And we've already talked about how that is a really uncomfortable process, but I'm going to actually show you why it's uncomfortable and why, when it gets uncomfortable, is the moment that we should be celebrating most. So I want to walk you through these 4 phases. And as you're listening, I want you just to notice which phase you believe you're in right now in your next evolution, your next up level. Because we're going to find ourselves in one of these 4 places at all times. And if we're constantly evolving, what's going to happen is you want to get to phase 4 and then go back to phase 1. So I'm going to give you the 4 phases, and then we're going to dive into each of them, because that's where you're really going to be able to hear where you're currently at and also what needs to happen in order for you to evolve and step into the next phase. Because there's a specific part in this process where most of us tend to get stuck. So the 4 phases. The first one is called unconscious incompetence. I'm going to talk exactly about each of these and what they mean. Phase 2 is conscious incompetence. Phase 3 is conscious competence. And phase 4 is unconscious competence. I have notes in front of me, so I didn't mess that up because that is a mouthful. But I want to break down what each of these means, because understanding this is really the key to your next up level and making sure you don't get stuck. So the phase where we all start is this first phase called unconscious incompetence. This means that you don't even know what you don't know. In fact, most of the world right now is walking around in a state of unconscious incompetence. Not that they're incompetent. I want you to hear my heart on this. It just means that they don't know what they don't know. And until something wakes us up and says, hey, I think I want more. I think more is possible for me. You don't actually have to wake up from this phase. It's kind of this blissful ignorance that doesn't require you to grow, doesn't require you to ask hard questions or take yourself on. So there's nothing wrong with being in this state of unconscious incompetence. But for most of you, if you're listening to this podcast, something tells me that you are at least stepping into phase 2 in your own journey, which is where you become aware that there's more for you. And with that awareness, knowing that there's more for you brings in a whole set of things you now realize you don't know. So this is where phase 2, which is called conscious incompetence, starts to happen, okay? Conscious incompetence, I think, is the most uncomfortable phase. I'm going to talk a lot about this one because between 2 and 3, phase 2 and 3, is where most people get stuck. They get stuck because, let's think about it. You're walking along in life, unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. You're not even aware that you want more or that there's more available to you. You're just kind of going along with the status quo. Again, nothing at all is wrong with that. But at some point, something tells me if you listen to this podcast, you became aware that there was more for you, a bigger purpose you wanted to fulfill. Maybe you wanted to grow your business or just expand on a personal level. You wanted to grow. So now you all of a sudden become aware that there's something you don't know about how to get from where you are now to where you want to be. Now you are conscious about the places where you are incompetent, the places you just don't know yet what that's going to require or how to make it happen. This phase is often where imposter syndrome kicks in because as you become aware of what's possible for you, our brains are wired to pick up on evidence and more pieces of information that fit the thing that we're focusing most of our attention on. So let's say you all of a sudden become aware, I want more. I want to be speaking. I want to be writing. I want to start a business. All of a sudden your brain is like, okay, pick up on more examples, more pieces of information related to speaking, growing a business, growing personally. Now all of a sudden your awareness is flooded with information that is showing you other people who've done it, other people who maybe are better at it than you are because they've just been at it longer. And what can start to happen is because we're becoming conscious of this gap, the gap is essentially between phase 2 and phase 3, between what you don't know and what you're going to learn and become competent at. It's the gap between who you are now and who you're going to become, but you become almost painfully aware of the gap, that there's something for you to learn. There's some growth that you're going to need to go through in order for you to have the thing that you want. And that is uncomfortable, my friends, especially when you go from this blissful ignorance to knowing that there's more in you, not being able to shake this feeling that you're meant for more. And all of a sudden realizing there's a lot you don't know about what it's going to take for you to step into that. That is such an uncomfortable process. And if we're not careful, we can get stuck there. So I think the key is to have humility, but also to have courage. Have humility and grace, knowing that, I'm just in this conscious incompetence. I'm now aware of some of the things that I don't know, and I'm going to have to learn some things. I'm going to be humble and realize that I'm going to have to become a beginner again and have the courage to then step into that, even when you feel like an imposter, even when you feel like everyone else is doing what you want to do and doing it better, to know that that feeling inside you that's saying you are meant for more was given to you for a reason. It is waking you up for a reason. You could have chosen to continue living your life in this blissful ignorance of a coma, a walking coma. And instead, you decided to wake up from that coma and say, you know what? Yes, there is more. Because the moment you become aware that there is more for you and that you want more, you can't put the genie back into the bottle, meaning you can't unknow what you now know. Once you become conscious of the fact that there's more for you and the fact that you desire more, Yes, you're going to also become conscious of the fact that there are some things you don't know, but you can't go back to unknowing, in my experience. So the only thing to do is to have the courage to push forward and do the work, learn what you need to learn in order to step into phase 3. So phase 3 is conscious competence. This is the phase where you start to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm really getting the hang of this. Even at the smallest level, it's the phase where your courage pays off. You've been showing up and doing the things that you promised yourself you were going to do. It's as simple as continuing to every single day lean into the areas you now are conscious that you're incompetent in phase 2, and looking for where can you learn, who can you learn from, what practices daily do you have to do in order to start to build some competence. This is where hiring mentors or even just listening to podcasts, consuming free content, and following the guidance of someone else who's done it is one of the ways to speed up your transition from phase 2 to 3. But in my experience, I am definitely the girl who I wish I could have really fast forwarded from phase 2 to phase 3, from that incompetence to competence. But I'm learning over 10 years into my journey as an entrepreneur. Yes, you can absolutely buy back some of your time and speed up the process a little bit by doing things like leveraging mentors or, putting yourself in really expansive growth opportunities. But the biggest thing I've learned is that it does take time. It takes time to develop real competence, the kind of competence that you own. And the competence is really something that comes from this commitment to your continued growth. And as you do, you also develop this confidence. So phase 3, conscious competence, you start to realize, oh, hey, I'm getting the hang of this. You may have a couple areas where you're like, oh, still not mastering that one, but I'm really starting to get the hang of it. This is where your confidence starts to build. And the ultimate goal is to get to stage 4, which is unconscious competence. This is where that thing you really wanted to do is now second nature. Maybe it's your new money mindset. We could apply this to any area of your life or your business that you want to grow this year. You're going to start out by realizing, hey, I want more. Now let me look at what I don't know and how I can learn that. I'm now conscious of some of the areas I'm incompetent. I'm going to start to build some traction and build some confidence as I learn, as I grow, as I stay committed to these daily practices. And the goal is to eventually get to the point where you realize that that area, which once was a total area of incompetence for you, is now unconsciously competent, meaning you don't even have to think about it. That's just your new money mindset. That's just how you operate. That's just your new success thermostat. Now that's the baseline. But here is also a word of caution, especially for those of you who, like me, you've been on this journey for a while. That once we reach this level 4, this phase 4, where we're unconsciously competent, and it feels kind of good. It feels good to just have mastered that and really feel like we've got some authority. We've got some confidence in this area. The bravest thing that you can do is go back to phases 1 and 2, take yourself on and continue to grow. Because especially once you have built up competence in a certain area, it takes a really, really deep level of courage to go back to being a beginner. And this is actually where I see so many incredible leaders stunt their own growth, probably unintentionally, because it's scary. It is a scary thing to go back to the beginning, to say, hey, I'm willing to be a beginner again. But that's actually where all the growth lies. And what's so cool is that you get to take a bit of the confidence along with you. So, I'll use myself as an example. I've gone through these phases multiple times. First with writing a book, then with launching a business and doing an event, to where now it does kind of feel like unconscious competence when it comes to hosting events and selling them out. But there's new things I want to do that I am painfully aware of my own areas of incompetence. And what I get to take with me into these new areas of being a beginner is the knowledge that I've been down this road before. And yes, it was uncomfortable, but once I got to the other side, it was so rewarding. So I have this confidence in myself to know, okay, I've done it before and I know I can do it again. But it's the courage each time to step into being a beginner again. You get to take the confidence along with you, but the humility to step into phase 1 and 2 and be a beginner again is ultimately where you're going to see the biggest difference between the people who soar and they are just going to look like rocket ships over the next 5 years. They just really are going to grow and expand at such a fast rate. It's because they're willing to go back and be that beginner, go back to the areas where they're consciously incompetent over and over and over again with the intention of building competence there. So I just want you to think about where you are right now in a specific area. Maybe there's some areas of your business that you're realizing, hey, I've got some competence. I really know what I'm doing. But what I ultimately want you to decide is where in your business, where in your life, where do you want to grow next? Where are you willing to go from being blissfully unaware, or maybe you've been painfully aware already and you just haven't been willing to dedicate yourself to building the competence, but where are you willing to be a beginner, humble yourself to learn from someone who has the results that you want, so that you can gain a new level of competence in an area that's really going to impact the world, but it's going to impact you. It's going to impact the magnetism that you hold to be able to attract the opportunities, the connections, and the resources that you want this year. That's ultimately what is required in order to become undeniable. And I've said this before. I do believe that there is a magnetism, there's an energy to someone who's in momentum. But to me, momentum means there's someone who is growing. There's momentum around their personal growth, not just their business growth. And that's ultimately what I want for all of us, because the more I've fallen in love with the person I'm becoming, instead of the outward success, the more I have really made my goals that are going to force me to grow, to be incompetent again. The happier I am, the more at peace and the more fulfilled I feel. But also the cool thing is the more that the business has grown, the more outward success has just come as a result. So I really hope that you've been encouraged by this Becoming Undeniable series. You can go back, re-listen to all of the episodes. If you loved it, go and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. That would ultimately just mean the world to me, because I do believe that we are not meant to do business or life alone. And that's ultimately the slight edge that can help you go through each of these phases a lot faster, but also feel less lonely as you're going through this growth journey, because that can happen and you're not going to ultimately be growing at the same pace as everyone around you. So if you are not already fully plugged into the Powerhouse Women community, but you know that you're ready to embark on a growth journey like this one this year, this is the community that's going to have your back and is going to be with you every single step of the way. And I'm just so honored and grateful to be on this journey with you.